Alright, we have some real interesting stuff to talk about, but please read the banner at the top. This is going to be real spoilery, because it's all about the unique items that have been put into Path of Exile DB, or PoE2 DB, which is a website that kind of, it's a database, as the name might imply. You know, this is their banner at the top. I've amended that banner to be a little more appropriate for the stream. But also, just to make sure we all realize how close it is. I was going to say how far away, but it's not that far away, it's close. It's real close. And there's one, before we go into the items, there's one bit of information that I had been looking out for. All this is spoilers, by the way. Spoiler banners at the top, all of this is spoilers. There's one mechanic that I had no idea what it did, but now that this has been updated, we actually know. Days. So I had a couple of nodes in my skill build for that fire crossbow thing. It's like days. I don't know what that is. Let's just put it in there anyway. So we put it in, but now we actually know what it does. It says right there. Zoom in a couple of notches just because. Some skills and effects will apply daze to enemies on hit. Daze builds up on a target to 100%, at which point the target will become dazed and confused. Daze lasts for 8 seconds, which is actually quite a lot. And a dazed enemy will take 50% more stun build-up. So it's a primer for stunning, which is actually really cool. Because if you have like a physical damage does the most stun build-up. So if you need a way to, you know, if you do a lot of cold damage or lightning or fire or chaos, if you have a way to apply daze, then it will be easier for you to then stun whatever you're trying to kill. I'm pretty confident I already have a lot of ways to stun built in here, but this shield charge, for example, I put dazing on there, so 100% of a physical attack damage from that will cause daze. I put stun on shield wall, because in theory, well, maybe it should be the other way around, but because I think I'll probably keep shield charge as my like getaway skill, because I think I'll be able to go through big things, which I wouldn't be able to with a dodge roll. But anyway, I have to put daze on here somewhere. So with the Gemelling Legionnaire, I got 3 extra skill slots. One of those will be the rapid fire crossbow skill that builds up heat, which then makes your grenades do more damage, like a fizz to fire or added fire skill buff. So I'll probably put daze on that. Because I've got armor. This one's packed out with maim and armor shred. That makes sense thematically. So I'll use that shred. Then use the what is it called? Incendiary shot. That one, I think. Flame bolt, fire burst. Not that one. This one? No. That one? No. No. This one. Rapid shot. So you can see here, fire damage per heat, so it kind of buffs itself as well. Which is cool. And it's more fire based, whereas the armor piercing round has no conversion at all, which is, that's fine. So I'll stack out, when we get a better tool for build planning, I'll stack out that fire one, but I also need to put Herald of Ash in there, because that's a big part of just more fire damage and a bit more synergy of when you kill things, the overkill damage then explodes as a damage over time fire effect onto the surrounding enemies. So it's, again, more fire, more explosions. Can't wait. With all that in mind, we have items to talk about. So one of the best things about Path of Exile 2 is unique items. So just going to scroll down the page. You can see, the ones that have been spoiled already, or leaked, or shown, have they've got the stats on there, so it's not really a spoiler. But I think even seeing these items is a bit of a spoiler. Like, they didn't really leak many of them, so because and the reason for I say that is the returning items, I think, are particularly the biggest spoiler for me, because there's, when you have a game like going from Diablo 1 to Diablo 2, the coolest items are the ones that typically go from the first game to the sequel. Now, Redbeak is not a cool item in Diablo 1. It's dog shit. Well, I mean, it's fine until you're like level 10 or something, so it's like a leveling sword, nobody cares. When, I would like to see what they do with this sword in particular. Like it's a good, it's going to be a good indicator of what, of how much they're willing to change uniques for the sequel. So if they make this more exciting and like something you can use until like level 40 or something, that'd be really cool. But we'll see. So I'll stop at the ones that have been leaked, and we'll talk about those. So this one, for example, Wyland Stake. This one is like an awesome early weapon for me in that build. You can see it breaks armor, and it does fire exposure. So I'm going to have all sorts of like added fire or converted to fire damage in my build. So this would be like the dream leveling weapon. I will pog so fucking hard if I see this in my first run, and I'm still like under level 50. After that, it's probably going to be outscaled by pretty much anything, so who cares? But yeah, the ones that have art, obviously drink it in, but and I'm not going to point out the ones that are returning, that don't have images, because they're the ones that I'm pretty keen to see, and we're just going to leave them semi-hidden, so to speak. So this Hog Hunt is pretty cool. It's a two-handed mace, so I don't necessarily want to use that early. I'm not going to have the stats for that Titan script to use a two-handed mace in one hand anyway, not early on. But if it drops, I just won't use the shield for a while, and I'll ignore the shield skills. That's fine. It's pretty nice. Like, that plus 15% critical strike chance is directly added on top of the 5 you can see at the top. So it goes straight to 20%. And you can see maim on crit, 20% chance to maim and crit. But again, I don't know if maim does the same thing in PoE 2 as it does in 1. So in 1 it does a slow, but it also increases the amount of physical damage the target takes. Cool if it does. Maybe it's just a slow now. I don't know. We'll see. Now, Hrimnor's, sorry. That's a returning item, but we don't know what the stats are. It was pretty bland. again, it's another good indicator of how fast and loose they're going to be with items if they've spiced this up a bit too. This was just like decent physical damage, like 10 cold damage or something. No real other special effects. It looks pretty similar to the original art as well, which is nice. And this is alluding to a different mace, but it's not the same. There's a mace called Trypanon, Trypanon, I think, which in Path of Exile 1, it's a 100% chance to critical hit, but it has low damage. So like, you don't really use it to do damage. You use it to crit and then make the, in Path of Exile 1, you can do like a cast on crit build. So if you're cycloning, you're always critting, so you're always casting whatever's linked to cast on crit. So this is interesting. It's got a different name, but it's a very similar name, and it looks extremely similar to Trypanon. So that's going to be something to do with crit. I don't know what, but I'm excited to see that. The art of surgery advances one mistake at a time. Now, Brain Rattler, that's also a returning item, and that's got updated art. Spoiler for Path of Exile 1, this is actually like, you can only get this item from like an endgame boss. So I don't know, where does it come from now? It's a pretty low level version, but when we've finished going through the uniques, I have a different thing to talk about it in our item space. And I'll come back to uniques like this in particular to just touch on it again. Some of the blank ones, Choba Chaba, also returning, and it has like a nice art update. What's interesting about this one is it's a minion item in Path of Exile 1. It still looks to have very similar very similarly themed art. And the big thing there is the actual symbol you can see on the face of the hammer. That's the symbol of innocence, which is a bit of a lore. It's one of the bosses in Path of Exile 1, but it's also the name of what is effectively like the not Christian god. Yeah, you kill gods in Path of Exile 1. Don't worry about it. But yeah, the religion uses his symbol as the kind of just the general, similar to the crucifix. That symbol you can see there is on the little like fish shape with the lines on the ends. That's the crucifix for the not Christian team in Path of Exile 1. But yeah, this was all about minions, so I'm interested to see if it still is. Again, it'd be cool if it was. Quecholi, or Quecholi. This is a really cool item in the first one. Art looks totally different. What's interesting is that cause enemies to explode on critical kill. On critical kill. That's very different. It was just like, in Path of Exile 1, it was enemies always exploded when you killed them with any hit from this. So this is much more situational, and that's the only stat that's been shown. That's kind of weird. Yeah, the art's completely different. It's a Val themed mace, but we'll see. I don't know what's going to happen with that one. I think that's probably the only interesting change, really. It was a really good leveling mall because, oh Christ, it gave you like 45 to all three stats, strength, dex, and int. So you could, and it had pretty good base damage, so you could use it like all the way up to Act 10 even. I reckon you could probably do the the last boss of the campaign with it, with the right skill. Now, Devada's Wind was like probably the first unique they showed us in Path of Exile 2. Back when they did the original demo with spears at ExileCon, maybe the first one. Yeah, it's like, oh, we have spears now. Look at this one. And this is where they kind of showed the other new mechanics that even back then they were keen to introduce, and that's engage and they don't have disengage. If the last attacks cause bleeding, if the last movement skill you used was engage. So it seems engage is just a skill now instead of a mechanic. So what I mean by that is, like, on the skills, you've got these tags at the top underneath the skill name, so AoE, trigger, fire, duration, and I'm trying to find one. So that where it says detonator, I had thought that engage and disengage was going to be a tag like that on certain skills. Doesn't seem to be the case given the way that this is worded. So you can see we've got causes bleeding if the last movement you skilled was engage. And the bottom line, skills fire 2 additional projectiles if the last movement skill used was disengage. That sounds like a different skill. It says last movement skill. So that seems to be different from what was originally shown. That's cool. But it's also for Huntress, who isn't in the game for the early access yet. She'll probably be in the next 2 months, 3 months. I don't know, something like that. Pretty cool. I bet this has something to do with Lunaris. It looks very similar to her spear in Act 9, the Path of Exile 1. This is a cool one. It's been out for ages. Crit chance, high crit. Freeze enemies on full life. So it's actually a really interesting, like, early defensive weapon. But it's a dagger, and there's no dagger skills in the game yet for early access, so I don't know. Quarterstaff, Bloodthorn, this is a returning item. Very little change here. This is actually very similar, but it was it would cause vulnerability curse to be applied to the monsters that you blocked with, because the old staffs had a chance to block. The quarterstaffs now that you attack with do not. So that's interesting. A little bit of a subtle difference there. Pillar of the Caged God. This is a bit of a classic item you can build around. It's all about stacking stats like strength into dex. So but it never had any sockets, I think. Let's just look it up. I cannot remember. Unique. Nah. Pillar. Did it have stat? Oh no, I'm thinking of the Grey Spire. Right. Yeah, this one has no sockets. Anyway. So this looks like 175, yeah. So this is what it looks like here. I suspect it's going to be quite similar. But again, that's why I consider that unique items probably the biggest spoilery thing because they're the most fun thing to find and learn about, because they can really drastically change your build when you find something that's like, what the fuck is this? So Pillar of the Cage God is going to be one of those items, because like the quarterstaves have such a different feel to what physical attack staffs did in Path of Exile 1. I expect this to be totally different. So, and that's kind of what I was getting at with, you know, this one, Red Beak. No idea what they're going to do. Even Trimnor's just could be anything. This one's pretty simple. Just a bit of added fire. Looks like a nice early leveling fire-based quarterstaff. Don't know what that's going to do. This one's quite coming soon. That one looks really cool. Dang. Now we're into some caster weapons. A bone wand. A lot of spell damage for such a low bone blast. What does that do? I won't spoil that. We can find that out later. Bleeding on hit for spells. That must apply to spells. They wouldn't put that on a wand if it didn't work for spells. So it seems like bleed can be done by spells now. Interesting. Life Sprig is a returning classic. Gives mana drain. Oh, that sounds like an interesting spell. And the roll on the plus to 1 to 3 to level of all skill gems, that's going to be really interesting. Obviously the 1 won't do anything, you won't really care about it, but a plus 3, that means like your spells could definitely, like you could use this for a much longer time with plus 3. And it'll give you like a nice edge on all of Act 1, probably. Now, Anizan Charge. I see. Nice fat added spell damage. Or increased, I should say. Wording is very important in Path of Exile. For example, more and increased are not the same thing. I'm not going to explain that, you can look that up. But I will say it's good to have both. You want more and increased on your items and skills and passive tree and everywhere. You want both. But yeah, corpses have a long and troubled past in Path of Exile. So Detonate Dead has been kind of overpowered for both players and monsters forever. I feel like they've only just recently gotten on top of it, but even then, like, playing Detonate Dead as a player was super reliable. You know, obviously the amount of damage you're doing scales with the life of the monsters, so you're never going to run out of damage. You're never going to feel like you're behind on damage, because you've only got to kill one monster to then do enough damage to kill the rest, effectively. So something like this is quite low level as well, level 16. 25% chance not destroy a corpse when consuming corpses, and skills like Detonate Dead consume corpses. So this sounds like a really good early weapon for that. And there's lots of other ways to consume corpses as well. It's not just doing something like Detonate Dead. There's like I think there's skills for like eating a corpse for like fat regen boost temporarily, things like that, or summoning a monster out of it, a different monster, not necessarily like that monster that you've killed, because I don't think Bind Spectre even destroys the corpse. We can, we'll leave that one for figuring out later. Sounds cool. Part of innovation. Galvanic field. Dusk Vigil, a staff. So this is a spell staff. As you can see, it's regular stave, not quarter stave. Now, Amber Fusillade is a really cool spell. You like summon little flame orbs above your head, and but you have a timer. When you cast the first one, there's like a 4-second timer before however many you've summoned start shooting at whatever's around you, so they're like automatically targeting. So you can be casting some other spell, and this will be causing those little orbs above your head, and then so it's just more damage. This would be a really nice leveling staff for a fire caster. Although it does say casting a spell. It's not even like specific to fire spells. So what you could do is the spell that appears in your skill book, you could put like ignite on that, and then there's ways to consume ignite or ways to synergize with other elements when the monster is ignited or burning. So for example, there was like one that a support gem, which was shock does not wear off on ignited enemies. So that's a really good way to basically have permanent shock. And you can keep refreshing the shock or trying to do more damage to make the shock higher. So yeah, think about putting ignite on that sub skill. Terran Shiver, I think that's a returning item. That'll be cool. Earthbound, it's a new one. Searing Touch, this is a new one, but it's mostly the same, except for this new skill that's been added to it. This thing's pretty simple. Target a mob, blows up after a bit. You could put less duration in that support slot to make that seed duration lower, and fire them off sooner. I believe there's also a support gem for increased limit. So where it says limit 1 active seed, it will just increase it to 2. So you can have 2. You can plant 2 seeds into enemies. Seems like pretty good damage. Looking at other spell gems, which also have stats applied to them now on this website, but I won't go into that. Seems like pretty good damage, but again, there's the delay on it, so it's hard to say it's like a reliable damage dealer. Sorry of Shards. This one's returning, but that spell is, I wouldn't have said that's related to the old Sire of Shards. So very interested to see what's happening there, because what the old one did, whatever projectile skills you had, they would fire in a Nova and had way more projectiles. But there's already like a support gem that does that. So, don't know. The Endless Night. We have no art for this one, but that's pretty good. I think it was one that was in the some of the old footage. But yeah, that's really strong. Like removing resistances when you just chill something. Very strong. So you could chill things, swap back to a lightning spell, and see, this is why you absolutely want to have 2 weapons. Regardless of what your build is, have a second weapon. just make it do something else. You don't have to go in on like hard on that something else. Like in that in this setup here, I've got, like I said, this one's all armor break and it's crossbow, but I've got shield and mace skills. Otherwise, I'm going to use both slots, and you absolutely should too. So this is a really good example of why you should. It's completely removing. You can just cast some basic bitch cold spell that applies chill reliably, and however long the chill lasts, it'll make both lightning and fire damage and cold damage do way more because they're not resisting it at all. Super strong. Widow Hail returning. It's also identical, except for the damage is a bit lower, but that doesn't really matter. You don't buy it for its damage. Buy it. Trade. You can buy it through trade. Trading with other characters, other players. So you could buy it. Not with real money. No real money trading. That's cheating. And you'll get banned, so don't do that. Quill Rain, exactly the same, pretty much. Oh, actually, is that arrow speed the same? Attack speed, yes. Dexterity, yes. Arrow speed. Let's look that one up. Yeah, it is. Look at that. Projectile speed. But there's also less accuracy. And also more damage. Huh. So it is quite a bit lesser an item. But look at the art difference. Like, that's because there's an interesting video from one of the core art guys from ExileCon last year. The art is so much more improved for one big reason. What they did with Path of Exile 1 when they were making items is they would draw the item as a 2D thing, and that's what we're looking at now. But then they would model something else, or as close to the basic version of a short bow, for example. And sometimes they would then try and add the 3D art for a unique item. They would not always do that. And indeed, there's still quite a few unique items in Path of Exile 1 that don't have 3D art, so you can't tell when you're wearing it that you're wearing that item. Now, in Path of Exile 2, they did the opposite. They actually make the 3D model first, and they take pictures of it with lighting, special lighting for uniques to make it look even better. And that's the art we're looking at here. So that's really cool. And it guarantees that we have a 3D model for the 3D art, so a character using this bow will be using exactly that bow, because this is just a photo of the bow. So that's much nicer. We have another returning item here, Death's Harp. It's pretty simple. It was a pretty simple one, but it's a really good leveling bow. Death's Harp? Was it Death's something else? Yeah, what's Death's Harp? Pretty simple, but really nice to get like towards the end of the campaign. I suspect it will be roughly the same. Now, that's the end of the bows, and we go straight into a crossbow. This is only one unique crossbow. As far as I'm aware, they've said a few times that they're going to have a unique item for every base item type. But I'll talk about that later. And the reason I think it's interesting we can only see one unique crossbow is that we've seen multiple types of like base crossbows. So maybe it's a bit weird why we don't see at least the art or the listings, like this one, nothing in it, but a listing for the other unique crossbows. I don't know, maybe they're still data mining. Now we have the scepters. Again, we've only got art and the implicit skill provided on these, so I won't dig into those, but it's exciting as well. Now we'll go quickly through armors. Bramblejack's returning. You can probably guess what that one does. New. Returning. And this is a well, is it rare? It's not that rare, but it's a very, very powerful end game armor with fucking heaps of armor on it. So we'll see how powerful they make that one. Now, Kalam's Heart is a very iconic item. It used to be like one of the best items to get, because one of its core stats is it never had any sockets, which was a big deal in Path of Exile 1. To not have, because your chest piece and a two-handed weapon were the only way to get 6 sockets on one item, which was the only way to get maximum damage for one skill. So you basically had to use the two-handed weapon with Kalam's Heart, until much later where they added the Squire, which is a cool shield, or they added in ways to have inbuilt support gems in helmets and weapons and shields. So very early on, this was super powerful because the primary stat that it gave you was a shitload of life. No other source of life comes close, except for another new chest piece called Utula's Hunger, but it had the downfall of you couldn't have life stats in any way, shape or form on any other item, or you wouldn't get the bonus that came with that Utula's Hunger chest piece. So it had that massive drawback, really, but it was still reasonably good. Still quite good, really. Bristol, that's a nice one. Nice way to get free rage, but it has evasion, so you're going to be getting hit less, or you want to be putting yourself in like risky positions and getting hit by spells. Interesting little thing to play with early on. This is a returning item that's very similar to the original. Sands of Silk, we've seen this one. What's missing off this is it turns your dodge roll into like a sandy blink. So that'll be really nice. Like mid game item. It'll probably be good for speedrunners. I bet they'll love the shit out of that one. Ash Rend is returning. That's a very cool art for it. We'll see how different that one is. Brisk Wrap? I think that's returning as well. That seems different. Not hugely powerful, but seems like another good mid game, maybe early item. Rat Cage, another returning item. That had some use early on in Path of Exile's history. I think it was another good source of life as well. Just look that up. Rat Cage. Oh. Rat Cage. Yeah, a pretty decent chunk. But this may or may not be a downside. The 100% of fire taken as physical. But the thing is, it's an evasion base, so you are not going to have high armor to mitigate that fire to physical conversion. There's obviously ways around that. With every rule in Path of Exile, there is an exception. And that's kind of the most fun thing when it comes to designing both a build and finding all these items to then shift how you think about what you've done to see if you can fit it in or inspire you to make some other build later on. Queen of the Forest also returning. Let's see what they do with that. Ghost Writhe returning, and that one's pretty much exactly the same. I think there was maybe some intelligence on it, on the other version of it, but the really important parts. Oh, it had life on it as well. So that's interesting that it doesn't have any life on it. Anyway. The Blacked Out. That's a cool name. Damages it over time, bypasses energy shield. Now, bleed and poison work differently, but they aren't the only types of damage over time. You have burn or ignite damage, which is damage over time, and there's generic chaos damage over time, which is not the same as poison. And there will be, I'm sure there will be other generic physical damage over time debuffs. So, gotta be careful when you're using that one, because if you have a really low life but really high energy shield, and you walk into like fire on the ground, that's fire damage over time. So that'll fuck you up. But it has, that last line is the same as a skill point called Agnostic, the Agnostic, in Path of Exile 1. So if you have high mana regen, then that will effectively counteract damage over time, which is not hitting your energy shield. What you won't be able to do with this is use Chaos Inoculation, which makes your health 1. It's not going to happen. You can't do that. Very cool art. Probably has something to do with skeletons. Cloak of Flame, another returning, and a very, very similar item to the original. That's a very cool. They've had this in the. Oh Christ! On some of the teaser images, so that's pretty cool. Don't know what it's going to do. A very pretty outfit. This is a returning item. It was cool because it had like a built-in high levels added chaos gem, and it made your mana costs also have an equivalent life cost. So we'll see what they do with that. You can see the flavor text at the bottom there. My price is your blood, and that's the implied, mana cost plus here's a life cost. Would probably be really good for the blood mage because she has so much spell lifesteal. 10%. It seems like a lot, but if you have a lot, if all of your spell mana costs also include an equivalent life cost, you're going to need that. But remember, you can do away with the mana cost by using the blood magic node on the skill tree. So you're only paying for the life cost. The Velvet Orchestra. Sounds fancy. Chevron's Wrapping. That's a returning item. It's quite iconic and very useful. It had a unique property of chaos damage did not bypass your energy shield. That used to be the case in Path of Exile 1. In Path of Exile 2, chaos damage does not bypass energy shield, but it does do double damage to energy shields. So we'll see. That'll be something very different will have happened with this one. That'll be interesting. And I wonder if they're going to make it as rare as the original one, because the original one was very rare. Very cool looking armor for some nice Renaissance roleplay. This one's really interesting. Like, yeah, it's an armor and evasion base. 50% chance to avoid death from hits. That will be a really interesting... Like, you could build around that as a defensive mechanic. 50% chance to avoid death from hits. You could run less health and really just fucking go full YOLO with this and just die 50% less than you think you would. So I feel like there's some really interesting power in that one. Like really max out on evasion, get the acrobatics node as well. You could feel a lot tankier than you actually are and just constantly be running around with low health. Really interesting. Some very cool looking items. That looks cool as hell. They're holding hands, how cute. Quite simple but still nice. Now the belly of the beast. That's very similar to the original design. This is a returning item as well. One of its unique properties was it had a very, very high increased life roll. It was like 30 to 40, I think, with the rolls, and just other pretty generically good stats on it. So this was like a really solid go-to for like endgame back in the day. So be interested to see where they go with this. I suspect it'll be a, still quite powerful and good for mid to late game getting into it anyway. Doriani's prototype. Also returning. It was a really unique piece of armor in that your lightning resistance also set all the nearby enemies' resistance to the same value. So if you had minus 200 lightning res, everything close by also had minus 200 lightning res. But you don't necessarily want minus 200 lightning res unless one of the properties on the armor says your armor counts towards lightning damage hits, which it did. So if you had, I really don't want to try and describe how armor worked. Basically, if you had 10,000 armor, you could completely nullify a 100 damage hit. So it's kind of like this reverse logarithmic equation. Very complicated. Don't really care. You just want lots of armor. If you're going to use armor. And that kind of goes for any of the defensive mechanisms. You want a lot of whatever your main one is, but it's still good to have like 10% of that value as either energy shield or evasion if you were stacking armor, for example. So it's just nice to have those other little buffers and a way to refill them in the case of energy shield. So yeah, this was a super unique. It was, no pun intended, it was really fun to build around, but you really had to lean in on giving yourself negative lightning res, giving yourself a lot of armor so that the hits of lightning were negated, and obviously just giving yourself a nice short range lightning skill to capitalize on it. The Coming Calamity. So this is returning, and it's moved onto a completely different item type. In Path of Exile 1, it was very unique in that it made any Herald skill only reserve 45%. Well, it made any Herald skill reserve 45% of your mana, where normally they would only reserve 25%. But you can still put support gems on Heralds and other auras in Path of Exile 1, but they have a fairly steep increase in cost. So you could fully socket and link a Herald skill, but that would probably drive the cost up to almost 100% of your mana. So using this took it down to 45. But it was also on an energy shield base. So it was really only used for a couple of specific builds. Partly because of that very low energy shield that it gave you. So given that this seems to be on quite a high value armor and evasion chest piece, I bet this one is quite different. Now, Ice Tomb's returning. That'll be cool. This is a new one. Gives plus 100 spirit. So that's what we use for reservations now as opposed to mana, like we just talked about with Becoming Calamity. But it has that downside of Int gives you no mana. So it'll be interesting to play around with. If you want spirit for either more minions or more auras or more positive modifiers for your auras and minions, of course. New item. Very cool. Like the flavor text. Yes, but what if? Vol's Protector. This is returning as well. This one's very similar to the original. Kind of that line. 25% chance to gain a power charge on crit. Very similar. But power charges do not less. Well, I suppose you could say less. In Path of Exile 1, all the types of charges, the 3 types, they gave you something for just for having them. In Path of Exile 2, you have to spend them. They're kind of like a resource that you can have, and then they will buff up a skill. So this is a really nice way to gain power charges for Flicker Strike or whatever other skills. Soul Mantle, that one's returning as well. Couture of Crimson. Now, I don't think this is any good at all. And the reason I say that is 25% reduced maximum life is a lot. That's a big hit. Reduced bleed duration is pretty good though. 50% reduced. That's quite nice. And life leech can overflow is also quite nice. So what that means is if you're leeching life, goes to full and the leech effect actually stops. So if you then get hit, then it just reduces as normal. If you have that overflow listing somewhere in your build, and I think there's going to be a support gem or something on the passage tree that also enables something similar, that means your leech acts like regen, where it's constantly, topping you up again until the leech session, we'll call it, runs out. So that might be a good mid game item, just to kind of give you a taste of what that overflow mechanic might be like. Chains of Command. I love the original version of this in Path of Exile 1. basically, there was a skill called Animate Guardian, where if you put like a set of boots, gloves, helmet, armor, weapons on the ground, you could summon them and apply them to this animated guardian, and you just follow you around and hit stuff. They're also very good for putting auras and special effects on. There's very few very specific use cases for that in Path of Exile 1. But what's interesting is we haven't been shown Animate Guardian in Path of Exile 2 yet. But what was also special about it is you could put if you put a cool weapon on your Animate Guardian, whenever the Animate Guardian got a kill, it would summon a copy of that weapon. Up to 14 copies of that weapon. And if the weapons got a kill, they could summon a slightly weaker copy of themselves. So it was kind of like a self-replicating weapon Animate Guardian, which is really cool. Very cool. The Apron of Emeran. Aggravated is like triple damage to your bleed DPS, bleed damage over time. So that's really strong. Really good early game bleed item. Gloom Form. Reduced light radius, but that smoke cloud when you are stationary. In Path of Exile 1, there's a couple of ways to make like a smoke cloud, and does what you might expect. It causes the blind effect on enemies that are in the smoke cloud, and blind means you have more evasion and the enemy has less chance to hit. So it's kind of like quite a powerful evasion based buff. But what I want to know is if the smoke cloud lingers at all. Because if you move and it immediately disappears, that's fucking pointless. Who cares? Because especially in this game, where you can move while casting, or shooting with a crossbow or bow, and even some melee skills, you can move while using them. So you should be moving all the fucking time. If you momentarily stop and laser smoke cloud and you can walk out of it and it stays there for like 4 seconds, that's cool, that's great. But this doesn't appear to be a skill that you can put sockets, support items into. So I think it needs to be pretty strong for it to be of any use whatsoever. And the way to make it strong is to make it linger. So, I don't know. We'll see. Very cool. New. Very cool and new. Cool and new. Cool and new. Azumite Peak. This is returning. It's like a nice early leveling armor helmet. Black Sun Crest also returning. Pretty much exactly the same. Those about 3 values at the bottom, they roll from like 5 to 15%. So obviously the best one to have is all of them to 15%. You're never going to get that though. It's real rare. Thrill House returning. It's a cool and fairly recently added item. Where simply wearing it only gave you one stat, and that was Onslaught. And Onslaught is just like a fairly generic attack speed and movement speed buff. But they haven't told us what it does in Path of Exile 2. So I don't think it's going to be the same. I think it'll be something different. That's cool. But I do want it to only have one stat on it. That's important. Dyed Bell returning. Different. More powerful though. This is like the same as the Warbringer's function, where it destroys corpses when you war cry, but it's not as powerful. Still cool though. It's a good way to get like a weaker version of that Ascendancy node on other classes. This is cool and new. We don't have any art for those, but they're both new. This is a new one. I don't really get this one. Like that 100% increased mana regen rate must be significant in how good it feels. Okay, it's 50% reduced maximum mana. Sounds real bad. Especially given the way that people have said, like, you need mana in Path of Exile 2. So, don't know about that one. We'll see. Gold Rim is a classic. It's an absolute meme icon. It's one of the best leveling helmets in the game in Path of Exile 1 because it gives you a lot of resistances for, you know, life, fire, cold, and lightning. So you can wear that right up until end game, and you'll have half of your resistance problems solved. But it did basically nothing else. I have a feeling it's going to be completely different. So that'll be exciting. Rat's Nest. Well, interesting if that's like a soft set item with the Rat's Cage. We'll see. But this is new. This is also new, obviously. Now this is new. So that's like a very weak Righteous Fire. So Righteous Fire is a skill where you press a button, or the button, and you set yourself on fire. But there's an AoE around you where everything else is taking the same amount of damage that you should be taking. Your fire resistance reduced the amount of damage you could take, but all the monsters will still be taking the full damage. But we haven't been showed Righteous Fire yet. It's a fairly iconic skill for Path of Exile. And there's like a whole subset of players who basically only play that skill. Now 100 base fire damage is fucking nothing. It'll be quite nice up until like level, I don't know, 40 maybe, I think. It'll still be significant and noticeable there. But anything beyond that, it's going to be dog shit for only that 100 base fire damage. What's interesting though is it doesn't run out while they're in your presence, and what that means is that they're basically on the screen. No big deal. But it doesn't look like you can enhance that as if it were a skill like those staves and things. So yeah, dog shit. Maybe fun for leveling, but fairly useless beyond that, I think. Elivor. This is a returning item as well. It would give you life back when you suppressed spell damage. So spell suppress is like a stat where there's a percentage to suppress a spell that hits you. And if it's suppressed, then it just deals half damage. So it's a very good stat to have. And this made it feel even more powerful because you would take that half damage but then heal a flat amount of life. So if you reduced a 500 spell damage hit by 50, you take it down to 250. And this rolled up to 350, I believe. So you would actually heal, after taking that hit, an extra 100 health. So in the right setup, this can really take you all the way to the end game. That one's new. That's returning. Quite iconic. It's a bear's head. Very cool. But kind of like a generic good attack helmet. Attack speed, lots of dexterity, lots of life. So we'll see how much that one changes. Heat Shivers returning as well. That was very cool. It was like it was a very early example of combining 2 elemental types of damage. So I expect it's going to be very similar to that stuff where if something's chilled, it has no elemental res. This will be something like that, but more focused on fire and cold, as opposed to generic like that other one, where even lightning damage got a buff out of it. So this will be cool. Alpha's Howl is returning as well. This was a one of the few rare unique items that gave you lower reservation cost in Path of Exile 1. So I suspect they'll change this one to a spirit function thing. So that could be cool. Crown of Thorns returning. So a nice little low level spellcaster helmet. Very different now, it seems. Devouring Diadem also returning. Looks like it's had a pretty interesting facelift. Some red eyes in there. Now there's less stats. So let's go and have a look at the original one. All it does here is gives you a fat life recovery on eating a corpse. So it used to do quite a bit more, and it also gave you a skill on the tree. Devouring Diadem. So look at all this shit. There's a lot. And you even get like 2 random mods on it. That's what this squiggly lines are. You could take it to an NPC and say, show me what the squiggly lines are, and you'll get a choice from 3 different squiggly line stat options. So it was quite a nice and a very, very frequently used end game helmet. So you can see that's roughly the same as what that last line was on the new version. But what was really powerful was this energy shield recharge to start when you use a skill, but also Eldritch Battery. So Eldritch Battery here is not the same as Eldritch Battery in Path of Exile 2. But I'll let you figure that one out. That's a new one. Looks cool. New. Looks cool. This one's returning. And what's funny about this one is this is actually an upgraded. The item with that name is an upgraded version of an item that came from the, what's it called? Incursion League. So it doesn't, we obviously don't have the base version of it to then go into Incursion and then upgrade it here. But this was all about life regen and stacking intelligence and energy shield, I believe. But it was very popular on Animated Guardians. This is a new helmet. Could be cool. It's got that series name on it, so it's probably going to be a very iconic and special. Grey make. That looks pretty rad. This looks like a really nice leveling helmet. All of those stats are probably going to be variable. So they haven't put the rolls here like they did with, say, this one, where you can see the plus 10 to 20. I bet all of these can roll. If they don't, that's really weird. But the flavor text at the bottom, sometimes patching up your equipment gets out of hand. What if they are just like that? And this is, supposed to be just like a really interesting little gap filler. Don't know. We'll see. I suspect it is that all of those stats can roll, because if you look at the fire, cold, and lightning res, they're all different. I bet they go from 1 to 10. The life goes from 5 to 50. Things like that. Smiler Knight. This one's one of the cooler looking items, I think. But we'll see what it does. Wild Knight's new. Bringer of Rain is returning, which is very cool. It was one of like a very, very old helmet, but what was special about it was if you wore this helmet, you couldn't wear chest armor. So it looked like the classic gladiator helmet, that sort of like brimmed thing with a feather coming out the back, but also like that face grill. But it also had like inbuilt support sockets. So that going back to that point about Calum's Heart not having chest sockets, this meant you could have a 4-socketed skill in your helmet because you'd have 2 support gems that were built in. So you could not wear chest piece, still get a 6-link attack, and it has pretty good armor, evasion, and life as well. It's probably the highest life roll on a helmet. So we'll see what happens there. That'll be an interesting one. This is new, that's new. This is returning. This was all about hurting yourself with physical damage when you cast a spell. So we'll see what it does. Veil of the Knights returning. It was a dog shit, completely useless item. Looks totally different here. Maybe it's not completely dog shit and useless. We'll see. That's a new one. It's very cool. That one's very cool sounding, but it doesn't have any art, so maybe it won't be. Lee Cast is returning. That's a pretty cool item. It's another good item that you might put on a animated guardian. But what it did was it reduced your damage by 50%, but then gave you an aura where, reduced your damage by 25%. And let's just look it up. Yeah, reduced your damage by 25%, but then increased it by 50%. So, what the other interesting thing was, it could stack. So if everyone in the party is wearing them, everyone would go individually down by only 25 from the item itself, but then you would have plus 50 for one person, plus another 50 for the second person, plus another 50 for the third person, and you can have up to 6 people in a party. So if you want to do like a meme run where everyone has to wear these, it's actually kind of viable and fun. So we'll see what they'll do with this. Well, we'll see what they do with this one. This is returning as well. It's had a nice art upgrade. 3 dragons returning. Looks very similar to the original, but obviously upgraded. And it was interesting and like a quite sought after, very, very long time ago. Because what it did was it changed what element your elemental damage applied. So fire damage would apply the cold chill, cold would apply shock, lightning would apply ignite. I bet this would be similar to that, but maybe it'll do like scorch instead of ignite, or electrocute, or those extra steps on top of the elements that we have now in Path of Exile 2. This could be really interesting, really cool. So we'll see. Mind of the Council also returning. Facebreaker. Facebreaker are gloves. And they were really cool, very special. They had like 800% increased damage. I think originally they rolled 1,000, but up to 800% increased damage with unarmed attacks. Now, why they're special now is everybody has an unarmed attack, obviously, but you can put support gems onto your basic unarmed attack. And a lot of the monk skills with the quarterstaves are unarmed because you're using your palm to apply the damage. So, these could be really fucking cool. Again, I would like to see them make a comeback. Tree fingers, these are a nice, like, early way to get Giant's Blood, but that they don't give you any strength doesn't really help that much, I don't think, unless you're already a good way through the tree and have a good strength base. But Giant's Blood is like right on the edge, so it's something you may not be able to get until later in the game when you're a good way into your build. But these will still be very nice. These are returning. I don't know what they're going to do with this, because these are like a fun leveling item, because they're kind of like nice generic stats, but they also helped you. They gave you like a 10% chance to get one of any of the 3 charges: endurance, frenzy, or power charges when you kill something. So it was a cool way to have like those sort of fairly hard to get buffs very early on in the game. We've got new item, Atziri's Acuity returning. We'll see what these do. I think these will be quite different to the original version. It was like instant lifesteal on critical hits, I believe. That's what the other one was, which is actually quite strong. Northpaw. I wonder if that's going to be something cool, like attacks with your right hand do fucking 20% more damage or something. Seems like that's what it would do. Grip and Winter, that's new. Idle Hands is new. Snake Bite, that's a returning one. Probably has something to do with poison damage, duh. Malagara's Virtuosity. These were quite an interesting little mid-game item you could use. They gave you a very high crit damage multiplier. So crit will work very differently. Or I should say stacking crit is going to work very differently in Path of Exile 2. So this was a way to get a big crit damage bonus. Not crit chance, just the value your damage was multiplied by when you crit. It's a good way to get a very high in the early game crit damage bonus. I suspect this is going to be roughly the same, just modified to make it work better for the balance that they're trying to achieve in Path of Exile 2. Painted Servant, there's a new one. Look pretty basic. Very low level energy shield. Might be nice for leveling. Candlemaker, I like the art. Kitoko's Current, these have been shown a while back. Lightning damage from hits also contributes to electrocute build-up, which is basically just lightning stun. So that's cool. I think that has an interesting space for high crowd control builds. Maybe a really good support, like a teammate. That would be really cool if they're using those and they're just like all about lightning damage, shocking the fuck out of things. Zap, motherfucker. What's interesting though is, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, but this, so we've got Kitoko's Current, we have Garrick's Current. I almost said Garrick's Cunt then. Anyway, Garrick's Current. It has the same art. And I don't know if they just fucked that up, or if Garrick's Current is a variation of this item with different properties, because it has same art but different person at the front. So keep an eye out for those ones. They might be cool too. Demon Stitcher returning. They were cool. Like I had a really, one of the only good builds I ever made was using Demon Stitcher, because what it did was sacrifice X amount of life, somewhere between 5 and 25 life, and it would give you that value, say it was 100 life, as energy shield. So it was a really good way to keep your energy shield always topped up. But you had to have a way to get life back. So there was one particular scepter that would give you spell lifesteal, and a good amount of it, if your shield had at least... Oh no, not that. It just gave you good spell lifesteal, but it also gave you high energy shield. The scepter gave you high energy shield if your shield had at least 30% block chance. And I think it gave you... let's just look it up. Cerberus Limb. Oh, it's a weapon. Yeah, it gave you... Oh no, I was right. It gives you spell damage leeches life if your shield has at least 30% chance to block. And that has to be the number on the shield, not your chance to block on your character sheet. The shield had to say 30% or more. Which is actually quite rare. You could craft a really high-end rare base to do that, but there's also a couple of uniques. But how it meshed really well with Demon Stitcher is it gave you a really nice energy shield pool to spend life to charge up if your shield had high armor. So if you get... This is a super easy combo. So if you combine that with, say, this, where you have 30% chance to block, very high armor, and a lot of life. Just those three items together give you like a really solid defensive base. And Cerberus Limb actually has really nice increased spell damage. So it was a pretty decent life-based caster foundation that you can kind of build anything into. And that would take you into endgame, really, because you could do anything with the rest of the slots on your build. And you would have a really strong life pool, really strong energy shield pool, strong damage, strong life steal to fill it back up again. So yeah, we'll see what they do with Demon Stitcher here. If it's going to be that same sort of sacrifice your life to give you something else combo. Maybe not energy shield this time. Maybe you won't sacrifice your own life. Who knows? These are new. These are new. Horses, I believe, are returning. Let me have a look at these. Horses. Yeah. I feel like these were quite rare. I very rarely remember seeing them. That increased rarity of items found is... It used to be dog shit stat, but it became a very sought after stat when they got rid of increased item quantity in drops. So I wonder if these are actually expensive now in Path of Exile 1. They're returning. We've got new Gravebind returning. These are a cool and fairly recent item where any kill around you counted as yours. So there's a few ways to make use of that, both helpful and unhelpful. So I'll let you guys figure that one out when we... And hopefully it's very similar, because I do like that sort of like inbuilt fucking with your friends function that it had. And yeah, won't go into it. We'll see if it's actually still capable of doing such things when the actual function drops. These are returning. They were kind of... I can't remember if they were good or not, but they've had an art upgrade, so that's something. New. Christ. I'm gonna sleep like a fucking baby tonight. So I can be up at 4 a.m. or 4:30, start streaming again for the Path of Exile 2 early access tomorrow morning. Hell yeah. We're almost at the bottom though, so get through this, then I'll fucking wash my junk and sleep. Corpse web. Pretty simple. Makes gas clouds as you move. You could put corrosion in that and make the gas clouds eat away at armor. Nice little debuff you can apply there. Infinite Pursuit, these are returning. That'll be probably something that comes from a breach boss of some description. Maybe the endgame version breach boss, because they were an endgame item as well. They kind of enabled a Flicker Strike build when combined with another jewel, a unique jewel. They're new. Deerstalker returning. They were low level boots. I think they were trap focused. So I'll be interested to see if they're in immediately when we don't have traps yet. They're new, they look pretty spiky. Wonder what they're going to do. Camel Sprint, we know about those. Kind of a meme leveling item. Physical damage is pinning. I'm hoping that applies to you hurting things, not things hurting you, because that would be terrible. I'm sure it's the former. You dealing damage causes pin to build up on enemies. Positive. Sibling rivalry. Don't know what these are, but I hope the art is like two different boots. That would be cool. So it's a high roll. They're a mid to late game pair of boots. Theories on what the art might look like. They're either black and gold, which is Sin and Innocence, they were brothers, or they are red and blue, which is Solaris and Lunaris, who are sisters. The Sin and Innocence are like effectively God and the Devil from the not Christian team, but Solaris and Lunaris were kind of generic sun and moon gods, no surprises. But they, I don't think they were necessarily aligned with any particular religion in game or group. But yeah, they're also bosses. Wanderlust returning. They're a very simple leveling item. Looks like they will still be. I think they meant you couldn't be frozen, so they were actually quite nice to have, even if you weren't like focusing on an energy shield. The bones, they've been modified a little to be a little more generic and nice. I think they were mostly about skellies in Path of Exile 1, so now they're just kind of like generic undead, which should also apply to raised spectres or bound spectres, which are of an undead monster. So that should be cool. Probably not like an endgame item, but will help you get more minions early in the game for sure. Wonder Trap there returning as well. Not terribly exciting, they were a leveling item. Windscreen returning. They gave you an extra curse. So, but they were on a very different base. They were a reasonably high armor base before. So we'll see. We'll see what they do now. See if they're still curse, extra curse like the original version. Now, one of the other helmets above, I think it was Azimite Peak, gave you iron reflexes, I'm pretty sure. Or was it unwavering stance? It did in Path of Exile 1, but that iron reflexes have moved to these boots is interesting. And Iron Reflexes converts all of your evasion rating to armor. I would also like to note that these are part of the Renaissance Fair set to go with that chest piece is much further up. Dark Ray Vectors, they're returning. They were quite a good mid to late game set of boots where give you an extra maximum frenzies charge. Wouldn't be surprised if it does the same thing here. Oberon's Bastion. Stacked Sabatons. They do look pretty stacked. No art, not returning. Ralakesh's Impatience are returning. They've had their base type changed. But the art, I expect it will have lots of faces on it. Because Ralakesh is a demigod from demigod boss that you fight in Path of Exile 1. They were kind of weird because the original version of them was not that great. But then they buffed them a lot by making them so that your endurance, power, and frenzy charges all counted as being the maximum number of them, which meant you always had you permanently had the buffs that those charges gave you, which are passive buffs, without even having them. Which is kind of nuts, because their power and frenzy charges are really good offensively, and endurance charges were recently buffed to be even more powerful defensively. So they became like they made them rarer, which is good. But you could put them on basically any build and get a whole lot of power out of it. Ghost March, that looks new. Power Tread also new. See what they do. Now shields. Some pretty. I like the. That's one of the first unique shields were shown. I think it was in the art. The item art talk that we talked about a little bit earlier. That was on the display. It's like, he was talking about that whole 3D modeling thing, where they make the 3D model first, and then they take pictures of it for all of the items in Path of Exile, and that goes for both regular items and uniques. So, and the way they make uniques look better is just by basically just give them better lighting and different colors. So yeah, this was one of the items on that little demo sheet showing the base Splinter Tower shield next to the unique version of it, so you can kind of see the quality difference in both the art and the lighting. But really, the shape has to be mostly the same, and I think the orientation is the same as well. You can see these tower shields are all facing kind of up to the right, whereas if we go to this Taj, it's going up to the left. So that's one of the ways, and the crest shield is kind of like, well, it's going to go on both ways. Damn, did they break their own rules already? And the focuses, they're kind of gone all over the place as well. Oh, anyway. So Wolfsbane, this was shown to us a little while back. Intimidate on block permanently. Intimidate used to only last for 4 seconds, and what it does, it just makes your attacks deal 10% increased damage. So it's quite a nice offensive buff on fairly low level shield. And you can always block because you have that ray shield effect, and that will apply to both spells and attacks, which is very cool. So yeah, this will be a really good shield for attack builds early on. I would love to get that at like level 5. Doomgate. This one looks cool as hell. Enemies are culled on block. That is a That's a very strange property for Path of Exile. Because Cull is when an enemy gets down under a certain percentage of health, like I think it's 30% for basic monsters, and it decreases as you go up the tiers. So you've got basic, magic, rare, and unique. So I think basic is 30, magic is 20, rare is 10, and unique is 5%. Those are the percentages that they get culled at. So usually cull only applies when you hit something, but this is like reversing that calculation and doing the cull when they hit you and they have less than that amount of health, depending on their category. So that's an interesting reversal of that property. But it's kind of weird that you take 20% of damage from blocked hits. So you know, it's kind of encouraging you to have your shield up when there's enemies with low health around. But you know, you kind of want them to hit you, but you're going to take damage, but they will die. So yeah, interesting. I like the flavor text. Welcome to Rayclast. Window to Paradise, we don't know what that's going to do. Wailing Wall. Certainly looks like it's complaining about something. This one was shown a little while back, but cannot use shield skills. I won't be using this because I like the shield skills that they've shown us. So you can't even use that skill there where it says raise shield. You can't do that. So it's kind of interesting that you can't do that. But that can block damage from all hits. What that means is in Path of Exile 2 there's a difference in the way attacks can be blocked or can't be blocked. The first way is that obviously when you raise your shield you can block everything. You can block spells or projectiles that are coming at you or from the sides. But bigger slam skills that hit the ground and make an AoE, or spells that come from above you, or attacks from monsters that have a red unblockable flare, like, you know, a lot of other games do that. This is unblockable. They cannot be blocked even if you have your shield up. But that line says can block damage from all hits overrides those special situations like the overhead attacks or the those red unblockable attacks. What the fuck is this on? Oh. I got off a big nosebleed. Oh. Hope you all sleep well. Next shield. Lycoside. This is returning. We'll see what that one does. That was an interesting chase shield for a while because the kind of core property on it was your hits can't be evaded by enemies. So you didn't have to invest in accuracy stat at all. Red Blade Banner, that's returning as well. So is the Surrender. They're both quite useful. Actually, this one's useful. I don't think that one's useful at all. Oh no, it was. That is the one I'm thinking of. Hang on. Let's go back. Red Blade. Yeah. This was buffed quite a lot in the last couple of leagues. So it became quite popular. So you can see it's got Warcry properties there. We still have Warcries, so we'll see how that goes. Maybe it'll be really good with Warbringer, who can just Warcry all the time. And there's some of the Warcries do damage, so we'll see how that goes. That, I dare say, will still be about Warcries, but keep an eye out for that one. The Surrender. High block chance. It also returned a high amount of cold damage to the attackers when you blocked. It had a built-in skill gem where when you blocked it had a chance to do a big physical hit at the attackers, so that was there but also had that high cold damage roll on top of that. The other thing it did was that it gave you health back when you blocked, so it was quite good. Wings of Vastiri. Was that an item? I don't know. I don't think that's a returning item, so we'll see. Maybe it is. Chernobog's Pillar. It's a returning item. Looks cool. It's like a big fucking pentagram on a big black tower shield. Wasn't particularly good, wasn't bad, but it gave you like a little bit of physical to fire conversion. So I expect there'll be a little bit of that, a little bit of fire themes in there. That's a new one. Looks cool. This is a new one. So this will be a really interesting team play shield. Obviously it's all in that last line there. What I'm curious about though is if you raise your shield, you may effectively have a 100% chance to block. But I don't know if that changes in your stat sheet or not. If it does, you can just like walk around holding your shield up behind your teammates and they can tank all of that damage with their block that is now 100%. I don't think it's going to work that way. That would be stupid. Maybe. The Flawed Refuge, that's returning as well. I don't remember what that one did. It wasn't terribly good. Very cool. It's a new one. Also new. Very cool. Very new. Very cool. Very new and cool. Prism Guardian's returning. Prism Guardian. That was a pretty cool niche shield. You could, instead of using mana as your reservation stat, as you would in Path of Exile 1, you could, whatever you put in there would cost life instead of having an increased value if you used a support gem to convert the reservation cost from mana to life. So it was pretty cool. We'll see. I wonder if it'll be like a spirit based reservation thing, or it could go the other direction where instead of costing spirit it may cost mana to reserve whatever's socketed in somewhere. It doesn't have sockets anymore. So yeah, I don't know. We'll keep an eye on that one. That could be a really interesting one. New. But Dunkelhalt, I think, is going to be related to Kaltenhalt. Kaltenhalt was like a weird little leveling shield which gave you cold damage, an extra amount of cold damage off your physical damage, and some nice cold resistance as well. We'll see. New. Aetiri's Reflection, returning, a very sought after endgame shield, but those stats are much lower. But it reflected curses on you to enemies. So I think it made you immune to curses as well. I'll look that up. Ziri. Yeah. Unaffected by curses. And Hex Reflection. And just quite good stats generically otherwise. Very good stats. Just no health, but that's alright. So we'll see what it does in this game. So it was quite rare. These are new, these are all new. Effigy of Cruelty, new. Let's see, what does this one do? Nice early game energy shield item. Just a nice way to kind of keep your energy shield topping up as you're moving forward. This will probably be something to do with minions, if I had to guess. Tabula Rasa. This one's a very iconic item, returning. Now, instead of having 6 sockets that are linked and no level requirements, which was a great way to get yourself through the campaign, because it was very hard to get well, for starters, you cannot get a 6-link item below level like 55 or something. So you had to be minimum that level to have a 6-linked skill, unless you had Tabula Rasa, which you could use from level 1, and you could 6-link a skill. It would usually be very mana hungry, so you'd probably just 4-link something, but that still made you feel really, really powerful. But this rune sockets variation, the rune sockets are 1 use only, so you put it in, can't take it out, which is cool. I like it that way. Makes you think about what you're doing. But there's also 2 types of socketable things. There's the Kurgan, the Kalgoran socketable runes, which are kind of like basic and standard and normal. But then there's the endgame Val soul cores, which are socketable items. So, in theory, you could have like a leveling version of one of these, and then find a second one and put the soul cores in it, and have like a really different endgame thing. But I won't go into those items. That's a spoiler for sure. Now there's one more category, and again this one's pretty sparse. We definitely haven't seen all of the unique items in here. I think there's still a lot more they haven't shown us. This is a relic to be used in the to be used in the second act trial thing. That's what it says in the box. But that first line says drops temporalis. That's another unique item. We have no idea what it does though, or what it is. Could be an amulet, could be a ring, could be a sword. Who knows? Asphyxia's Wrath. Returning item. Nice early game cold quiver, as you might have guessed. Black Gleam. Also a nice early game quiver. Fire based. Wax and Wane. 2-point quiver. Party on, Wane. Party on, Wax. Doedri's Damning. That's interesting. It's got a nice art upgrade. But that's a really nice early game ring. Still is in the second game, so that's cool. Call of the Brotherhood. This was a nice end game ring for a while, but it's been buffed here. I say buffed, but not that much. Or just the way that we get damage and change damage back and forth means that this may or may not be a buff. If that makes sense. Basically, the original version, only 40% of lightning damage was converted to cold. You can wear 2 rings, so you could wear the second one and have 80%. This one is 100%. So that seems like a buff, but it may not be, because you could still want to have that little bit of lightning damage to apply shock. But now you can have a second weapon slot. However, you may, because you're converting all of your lightning damage, it means you can't shock. But you could go with the Stormweaver Ascendancy. So you could be using lightning themed skills because you'll like them, but just be doing full cold damage and use the Stormweaver Ascendancy so that all damage can shock. So you can still be applying shock, and freeze with one lightning skill. So yeah, there's things like this are the best thing about Path of Exile. It's like, how many ways can I mesh things together? And like, you look at the skills, you look at the supports, you look at the passive tree, and then you look at the unique items. And we haven't, like I said, these ones we've gone through are just the ones that we have been shown through a little bit of data mining, but it's not even half of them. There is a lot to come. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for tonight. I am going to go to bed. It's only 9:30 here in Australia, in Brisbane. But I'm going to go to Betty Buys, sleep for 7 hours, maybe only 6. And then I'm going to wake up and stream for the whole weekend on X. And really hook into this build with armor piercing and flame buffs and explosions and shield explosions and big slams. It's gonna be great. I can't wait. I'm so excited. I want to, because I've been playing Path of Exile 1 since 2011. My account is one of the oldest ones Chris Wilson has ever heard of. I went and got him to sign a couple of things at ExileCon. And I said, look, my account's from July 11th, 2011. He's like, wow, that was old. That's an old one. And people share, oh, I started playing in 2015. I'm like, ugh. Kid. What do you know, kid? I can say that. Because I'm almost 40. And, but yeah. We finally have Path of Exile 2.